Buoyed up by the strength of successful missile tests in the last 60 days, DRDO Chief G. Satish Reddy has said India has achieved self-reliance in the field of missile systems and can produce whatever is required by the armed forces within the country itself. The Defence Research and Development Organization has conducted around 10 successful missile tests over the last 9 weeks, including that of the Shaurya hypersonic missile, Bramhos extended range missile, Prathvi nuclear-capable ballistic missile, hypersonic missile technology development vehicles, Rudram 1 anti-radiation missile, and the supersonic missile-assisted release torpedo weapon system. Meanwhile, on Monday, the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh inaugurated a model of an anti-satellite missile at the DRDO Bhavan. The anti-satellite missile system is seen as a symbol of national technological advancement. India had successfully tested its anti-satellite missile on March 27th last year, shooting down a live satellite in space under Mission Shakti. India is just the fourth country to have used such a weapon after the US, Russia and China. In this edition of Security Scan, we will analyze DRDO's missile technology. Joining me on the program today are Commodore Anil Jay Singh, retired, Vice President, Indian Maritime Foundation, and Air Vice Marshal PK Srivastav, retired defense analyst. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on this edition of Security Scan. So, Commodore, let me begin the program with you first. Let's first talk about the incredible feat that DRDO has achieved over the last 3 or 4 months. Of course, it's many years in the making, but we've seen a series of successful missile tests being conducted by DRDO. Your thoughts?
I would absolutely agree with you there, Frank, because I think it is not only about the number of missile tests that have been done in the last 2 months, it's about the wide variety of missile capability that has been tested. I think that's very important. And to be able to do it in such quick succession is a clear indication of how much effort has gone into over the years into developing these capabilities, that they're all maturing at the same time, and how many people would have been involved, and how difficult it would have been, and what a challenge it would have been to coordinate all these activities so as to be able to do tests. I don't think very many countries can be testing different kinds of missiles every week, or within some, at times even 2 within a week. And this is despite all the setbacks of COVID this year, etc., and all the criticism that DRDO often faces. I think the DRDO must get all the credit for this amazing feat of making India self-reliant in missile technology. Yes, we have a way to go. We are catching up on technology with the West. They are ahead in some areas. But that notwithstanding, I think, because missiles is one thing which, this is a technology we have to develop ourselves. And if we have to be a power, the kind of power we want to be in the region or in the world, then obviously we cannot depend on anybody else for this technology. So this focus, and this started way back in the 70s, and of course 1983, the IGMDP program, I think that really was the trigger and the catalyst which really propelled this missile development capability. But I think full marks to DRDO. I mean, whether it's in the air, whether it's from underwater, whether it's on the surface, whether it's surface to surface, air to surface, now even hypersonic, which is the latest and where technology is going in the future, I think it's a remarkable achievement, no doubt.
Absolutely. All right, AVM, let me bring you to the picture now. So what does this mean really for India's Make in India initiative? And like the Commodore has just pointed out, as far as missile technology goes, it's best to be indigenous, it's best to develop our own systems and, scale up our own manufacturing capacity as well. So what does this mean really as far as the Make in India program is concerned?
So Frank, let me start from manufacturing perspective, and I'm grateful to you for asking this question, because I was myself director of production for Bharat Dynamics Limited, where we make all the missiles. And I had great association with all these, iconic figures. But let me first start from 2 aspects which we need to know before our viewers can appreciate what we are talking about and what all these great names mean to all of us in this country. Essentially, first, the iconic figures starting from Dr. Kalam, who was our ex-president also, and then figures like Dr. Saraswat. There was one Air Marshal Narayanan who founded the whole thing, and then Dr. Prahlad, Dr. Avinash Chandar, and as little lesser known people who are known in the missile circuits but not so well known on the national stage, like Dr. Paniam. All these people contributed and created the defense missile industrial base, which is a thriving base which supports the manufacturing of the missiles. From the manufacturer's standpoint, like if I have demonstrated something, do I have the capability to produce in the right numbers? and get down to the, production drawings are different than the technology demonstrator drawings. Can I link them up? And how far I can make them indigenous? If I give the context of Akash missile system, we are nearly 100% indigenous, which is a great achievement. That shows that our industry has really developed, which has been a key factor for all our indigenization programs. So as far as missile segment is concerned, we did very well. That is one part of the whole thing. Second, which is very important to know, how does it connect to the air war fighting or future air war fighting or the air war fighting in general? Basically, there are two components of RMA, what we call. One is called, okay, it has to be very precision. What we in terms of missiles, we always call circular error probability. And second component is that I must be able to launch the missile to beyond visual range. Visual range, when I say, I mean the radar visual range also. That means enemy cannot see me, but I can see enemy and target it. These two components generally are called, merged with net centricity, they are called revolution in military affairs. Missiles are the only ones which give us this leverage. Missiles, as Commodore has very aptly pointed out, they have to be all types: surface to surface, surface to air, air to surface, surface to underground, water, all that has to be included. And there are all these things which are coming up with the capping of anti-satellite missile in our kitty. It becomes a very, very potent thing. And I must give compliments to DRDO for coming out with hypersonic technology demonstrator vehicle. It's a technology by itself which has come into our hands. Why I say so? Because I was in L&T and my own unit was manufacturing that vehicle. To some part, we also contributed. So all that taken into account, if you really ask me, it's going to make a huge impact and huge dent on our warfighting capability for all three services, including the Strategic Forces Command. It's also going to give us a leverage which will keep our adversaries a little bit at bay before they misadventure. And if you really ask me the context of current ongoing scenario, I think this is a capability which is keeping the adversary at bay and which is very important for a country like ours.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll continue to dwell on that particular aspect of it a little later on in the program. But, since we are talking about all of these technologies, a wide array of missiles and technologies that we have, Commodore Jaising, as far as, how we compare to, other organizations or how DRDO compares to its peers worldwide, how would you look at that comparison? And do you believe that we still have a long way to go and this is a good step in the right direction right now?
Firstly, as far as whether it's a step in the right direction, it couldn't be more right than it is. There is, like I mentioned earlier, there is no other way to go. This is the only way we can go. We have to become self-sufficient. Obviously, we are a country, we are not in the same league as the US or as Russia. They've been in this game for many, many more years. Their R&D budgets are probably more than our entire defense budget. So obviously, they can develop more time to technologies. But the very fact that we've, on our own, after all, we did. And you see, if you realize through the 80s, 90s, we were bound by various technology denial regimes. At every step, we found that they were trying to there were obstacles coming in our development program, which I think spurred the whole indigenization effort. So notwithstanding the fact that we may be lagging in technology behind some of these countries in terms of not having reached where they have, where we are today still puts us in the top league of nations. There aren't very many nations who have this technology. For example, the hyperglide technology. I think there's just 3 countries or 4 countries who have it. Or for that matter, the SMART. How many navies have been able to, or how many armed forces have been able to trial a torpedo which can be launched 600 kilometers away at a submarine? There is a lot of refining to do, but the fact is that this technology being demonstrated means that we can do it. And we are in the process of doing it. Of course, there are budgetary constraints, there are technology constraints, there are productional constraints. The firms which have to ramp up their capability have to be there. But if you look at the whole scenario in India, the atomic program, the space program, and the missile program have been great successes. And I think they all have some connection to each other. If you realize they're not sort of mutually exclusive of each other. So if we've been able to get this whole act together of putting all our resources and our brains and our capability together to build a national capability, and I think this is a great national capability, I think that's very creditable. In fact, just the other day, Dr. Satish Reddy was speaking at a seminar where I happened to be present. And I was quite amazed to hear how many tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 companies DRDO is supporting, how many projects they have with academia, how much money has been invested in academia. Now, we used to always think that why is academia not being involved more in the R&D process? But it's happening. He was mentioning, I think, something to the tune of 2,000 projects with academia are being processed, and about 1,000 crores has been spent on developing a relationship with academia. So it was time, I think, that India, with its vast scientific pool of manpower, was brought together. I remember about a decade ago, we had this discussion that CSIR has its own labs, DRDO has its own labs. They're not talking to each other. There are little turf battles. There are empires being built. But I think that's something that's probably behind us. And I think it is this sort of development that really triggers off this sort of national effort. Of course, there has to be a lot of political support for it. There has to be political support. There has to be budgetary support. And I think now that that's there, and I think if you realize the Indian foreign policy is very clear of where we want to go as a nation. We are at the moment facing security challenges which are unprecedented. We know these are there for the long term. They're not something that's going to go away in a hurry. So we have to prepare ourselves. And finally, whatever may be our relationship with whoever, we'll have to pull our own chestnuts out of the fire. Absolutely. So we should be ready for that whenever we have to do that. So I think it's a great effort, and it's a great achievement, and hats off to DRDO. I know I also criticized DRDO at times in some of my writings for various things, but here there's no question that they've achieved remarkable, their achievements have been really remarkable in this field, undoubtedly.
Absolutely. All right. So, AVM Srivastav, since we are here, since we are talking about collaboration, since we are talking about, how to bring in various stakeholders on the same platform, and we're looking at missile development, missile technology, missile manufacturing, is there a big opportunity really as far as the private players are concerned as well? Because that's something that the government has been talking about of late, opening up almost all sectors or to the private players so that, everyone can come on board and we can see, the right kind of progress.
So, Frank, if you really ask me, if we do not put both the arms together, that is the public sector and the private sector, the kind of synergy we need, the kind of flexibility we need in this kind of field will not be possible. So, Atmanirbharta, what Honorable Prime Minister keeps talking about, is feasible and possible only through this, for which we have come out with many, many policy initiatives, and we are giving a lot of kind of, what we say, coming on the equal terms to private sector players. I have also written in some papers how we can achieve it. But if you want me to really pick out, so I'll take the first question. You talked about how do we compare with the world as far as we are concerned in missile technology. So maybe the first thing which comes to our mind is about DARPA. Okay, we try to compare DARPA of US with our kind of DRDO and how do we function. So there are differences, but I would say these differences were more contextual. In our context, the kind of development we had in the economy, the kind of developmental stage we had, the kind of industry development we had. So now we can switch over to private sector more easily. But there are few, hurdles to be crossed still. The first thing which comes to my mind is about, IPR, intellectual property rights. What happens, I know it from personal, experience, when a private sector engages with R&D time. Let's say you engage with Akash, or you engage with Trishul program, engage with Prathvi program. It would be some 2 decades back or 3 decades back. You started making out the rocket motors, started making out the onboard processors. You did many, many things. But what happens when the program comes to fruition? Allow me to compare 2 programs. Trishul didn't work out. It didn't become a commercial entity, but the Akash became. Then what happens? The IPR does not vest with those people who are there for last 3 decades. If they're in the private sector. If you're a public sector, there's no problem. So this problem needs to be addressed. We can go to them the first go. First time I can place order on them. But the second time, again, it has to become competitive. So there's a lot of, it gives a lot of pushback to the private sector as to how I participate in a program which we do not know whether it will fructify and give commercial, output or not. So it can do this if this thing is, addressed in the sense, if I engage myself right from the beginning, there should be a co-IPR allotted to me. If that is done, then naturally you'll find a lot of private sectors coming forward, investing their own thing. Because let me discern, I was a production person also. I know from design to production drawing, there's a gap, there's a journey to be traveled. And when we travel that journey, a lot of problems come. Actually, if I give some statement, you'll be horrified. If for Akash to become really, ongoing project, it is not to horrify the viewers, there'll be at least 12 to 1300 things to be addressed in the design, because the production drawing, it becomes very, precise. It has to produce through very average people, tools, etc., the same thing repeatedly, which is a different art and science. So keeping that in view, I would say two things for our development program. One is the manufacturing, the IPR must be addressed. That is our first point. And second point, which is very close to my heart, that all the manufacturing people should engage with DRDO, not in a manner which is, one-way traffic. The DRDO tells what to do. It also receives and signifies that. That means you must have seen whenever we, as a BDL, we always had this little bit of, you would say, hard feeling that whenever a missile takes off, which has been manufactured by the BDL, because all strategic missiles are also made by BDL, the name BDL will not appear there. It will be only DRDO. Somewhere the BDL should also come. So it gives the synergy kind of things. I would say DRDO and the manufacturing base must synergize even better than what it has done. This is my experience of the last 46 years, if you really ask me. Okay. And the customer has to play a ball in it. The customer, I was customer too. I was in Air Force. The customer happens to be only criticizing. You must criticize for our improvement, but you must also appreciate, given the context, what we have done.
Don't just criticize for the sake of criticizing, but do it constructively is what you're suggesting.
As a nation, for the first time, it will be really not so potent, not at the international level. There'll be some deficiencies, but we are catching up very fast. Let me tell you, we're really catching up very fast. And if we are coming another round, then I'll talk about what we need to do further as far as technology is concerned, because I know, Frank, your program is primarily to focus on technology and what others are doing. So if I go by the patents, I go by the patents which are there in World Intellectual Property Organization. Our patent status is very poor. The patents created by DRDO is very poor. So why is it so? We need to address that. We need to file patents. We have to ease the patent filing. And we need to be as aggressive as China is, as aggressive as Russia is, as aggressive as US is. So this is one area. I think next time around when you come to me, I'll clarify what actually I mean. What are my thoughts on this?
Absolutely. We'll get another round of questions in as well, as far as what's the best way forward and what next. But before that, let me go across to Dr. VK Saraswat, former Director General DRDO. He's joining us on the phone line right now. Dr. Saraswat, firstly, great feat there achieved by DRDO, completing several of these tests over the last 2 months or so, at least 10 of them. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it has been a journey which has been going on for many years, and I think it has been accelerated under the present regime. The number of tests which have been carried out by the DRDO laboratories, both in terms of surface-to-air missiles, in terms of anti-tank missiles, air-to-air missiles, and even some of the strategic systems and so on. I think this has been a great achievement, and it's not only just taking forward to what has been done under the IGMDP. Now these are new missiles. For example, Astra, a new missile. For example, LRSAM, MRSAM, these are all new missiles. They are not the missiles from the oven of IGMDP. They have been designed, developed, ab initio in DRDO in the last about 5 to 7 years, and they are now going into the major flight trial phases, and some of them are ready to be delivered. So this is a great achievement. So that is the kind of growth of technology that has taken place in the country, and DRDO's capability in terms of missile development, testing, evaluation, and production have gone leaps and bounds. So that is visible today in this particular scenario when you see large number of missile tests are being carried out, that too successfully, and we are leading to production. So I have no doubts that India has become self-reliant as far as missile technology is concerned. There could be issues here and there; those have to be anyway resolved. But I'm not perturbed about those issues. I was listening to the conversation that's going on so far. I have a very, different views on those aspects. But that is when you ask me the questions, I'll come back.
Okay. So, Dr. Saraswat, let's also talk about what goes into making missiles, because you spoke about how this is something that is not new. It is not something that has happened overnight. It has been in the making for a few decades now. So, what really goes into making a missile?
See, missile development is a story that takes on with what exactly you want to do with the missile. That means the requirements, what are the kind of missions it has to perform. And when you really define the missions, that it has to destroy a particular target, it has to destroy it with that kind of an efficiency, with that kind of an impact, all these parameters are put in. Then comes functional requirement, whether it is what kind of a target was that, is that on the ground, or it is on the surface, or in the air, or it is in the sea. So all these parameters go into defining the requirement. And then once you define the requirement, we decide what is the kind of missile that has to be done, whether it is a missile which is going to be launched from the surface to intercept a target which is in the air, or it is a missile which has to engage a target which is located on the surface to surface, or a which will be destroying a target in the surface to air combat. So variety of missions are defined, and based on the missions and the parameters of the missions, we draw out what is called the design specifications for the missile. That is then further broken down into subsystem specifications. What should be the propulsion, what should be the guidance, what should be control, what should be the structure, what should be the weight, volume, everything. So these are the design parameters which get fixed based upon the mission parameters.
So let's talk about what next and the best way forward. How do we address some of these challenges, Commodore?
I think, as the Air Marshal very correctly put it, it's about a lot of more synergy required between industry, private industry, DPSUs, the government, the MOD, the user, there's the armed forces, all the strategic forces command, national command authority, and of course DRDO, which is where it's all going to start. And as you mentioned about the intellectual property, there has been this distrust. I mean, I don't know whether distrust is the right word to really use, but of sharing things like IP with industry, particularly private industry. Till very recently, private industry could not even approach DRDO with anything. It was almost as if they were two different compartments. And private industry was something that was outside the ambit of the national defense manufacturing construct. But I think these walls are slowly breaking down from what I understand and what, as I mentioned, Dr. Satish Reddy mentioning the other day. So, which is very positive because companies like Larsen and Toubro or some of these other big players, and I'm not only talking about the big players, it's amazing if you go to Hyderabad or Bangalore and visit the MSME ecosystem that exists over there. It's amazing the kind of work that is being done in satellite technology, in missile technology. Every small little MSME you visit there is saying, I'm doing this for Akash, I'm doing this for Trishul, I'm doing this for Agni, I'm doing this for Bramhos. It's really remarkable. And so they have become part of this larger ecosystem. And I think for that, if you really want that to work and industry to be an integral part of this whole manufacturing process, to give the user what he needs in time and in the adequate quantities, then there has to be, the MOD has to create that enabling environment. Now, that regrettably has not really been the case for many, many years. If you see the defense procurement procedures or defense acquisition procedures, they're so long and so convoluted that that small SME does not have the wherewithal he doesn't have either the financial or the time bandwidth to be able to go through this whole procedure. Poor fellow probably has to wind up before he can go through with it.
So, Dr. Saraswat, very quickly, what next?
I think there is a tremendous requirement for us today to now whatever programs are going on in the country, and also what is the requirement of various platforms as are being talked of. They are integrated in a big way and integrated to ensure that we have the aircraft from which the missile is to be launched, that an aircraft and missile gets integrated. The naval ship on which the missile has to be put, both of them have to integrate. The radars have to be integrated. So one is the integration of the systems on time and requirements of both. Second one is to produce these systems in large numbers and quantities. And that means involving the production agencies right in the beginning, during the development, and then taking it forward with a commitment that you will get the required number of missiles to be manufactured or required number of platforms to be manufactured, depending upon the kind of performance you achieve during the development. So if that kind of an assurance is given right in the beginning, I fully agree with the other panelists that there will be a commitment from the private sector to make, and also they will put in enough money even during the development. So if we have that as part of our defense production policy, procurement policy, that there are no NCNC things, there is direct involvement, identification of the production agency as well when the program is initiated, participation. And gentlemen, I want you, it is not that this is being thought of for the first time or coming up with this as the first time. Dr. Kalam's IGMDP had this particular specification right from the day one when production and the development agencies worked together. Of course, at the time it was largely PSU, but we included a large number of private sectors, MSMEs also as part of the overall scenario. And that delivered on time the required things. Yes, there were development problems, so delays took place. But then there was no gap